All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Think Sacred podcast. My name is Zach. I'm here with my father, Phil. And if you're new to the podcast, what we do is we usually talk about kind of more open topics, more philosophical and theological topics. And then usually one of us takes a more theological point of view and one of us takes a more philosophical point of view. Usually Phil takes up the theological view. We were going to talk about something specific that we talked about in the last episode, but I think these comments could end up being pretty much the whole thing. We have some comments to get through today, and so let me pull them up real quick for you, Dad. And so the first one, these are in response to one of our shorts. It was a short where we were specifically talking about stories of people predicting that a rapture was going to occur. This happened like a few months ago now, and the short, it was like they were saying that like there was going to be a rapture here in October or something like that. So anyways, so someone starts off, this is by Western Apache 1700. Matthew 24:36. Jesus said that only his Father knows. God the Father will declare the time and send Jesus. They are separate beings. The Nicene creeds are wrong. You have any anything to say about that first one? And then basically he has several responses and several things where he responds as well. But what did you think of that? What do you think of that first comment?
I would take history. I would take the historians back closer to the time of Christ, honestly, over someone today saying the Nicene Creed is wrong. The Nicene Creed and the Apostles' Creed kind of were, they were put in effect to combat heresy in the church. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So it's just difficult for me to say, hey, someone in the 21st century is saying the Nicene Creed is wrong, right? When in fact they were doing it to combat heresy that actually was creeping into the church, even at the time when Jude was writing, even at the time when Paul was writing, even at the time when Christ actually spoke about heresy that was going to happen, and watch out for false prophets that were already actually on the scene at the time. So, again, the Nicene Creed was there for a reason. It wasn't just put into place to say, oh, this is what we believe. They already believed it. They're just trying to put it into place to say, hey, here's a synopsis of what we believe. If someone actually comes against that, don't believe them. So I would have to say I have to believe the Nicene Creed over this person that put the comment in.
Yeah,
so that's my point.
I mean, specifically, so he's trying to say that that God and Jesus are separate beings. You know how we've talked about before about the Trinity, and we've mentioned how. And actually, I did this with when KT was on the podcast as well. We talked about the Trinity isn't actually in the Bible, as there's no specific thing that says, oh, there is a Trinity. But we understand that there's a Trinity when you read about the Holy Ghost, when you read about the Father, and then you read about Jesus being the Son, and then you can put that all together. Now. Have you heard arguments though where people say that no, those are separate beings? They're not all God.
Well, I mean, we have to be careful again because we talked about this in the past where where the the use of language. So I'm not a linguist by any stretch of the imagination. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I try to be careful with my words, but at the same time, sometimes I make the big mistake of using the wrong words, right? But when it comes to the Trinity, you got to look at the Bible and say, okay, what does it say about God, the Father? God the Father is God, right? I think that's pretty much just known that's what it is.
Yeah.
But then you look at the Son and you say, is the Son God? Well, yes, and I can show you in several places where it's really clear the Son is God. Same with the Holy Spirit. Is the Holy Spirit God? Well, the Bible says they are God, but there's only one God, right? So how do you how do you reconcile the two? Well, even back in Genesis 1:1, where it says God created the heavens and the earth, the God, it's like the way it was explained a long time ago to me, and there's no rebuttal for this at all, where it's like a clump of grapes. You know what I mean? The where even in Genesis, I'm sorry, where even in the Old Testament it says the Lord is one, right?
Yeah.
One used is like a clump of grapes, where it talks about the different words that are used in the Old Testament of God. There's Yahweh and Elohim and all sorts of different words, and you can actually play around with those and say, wow, this right here is kind of interesting. How do I reconcile that, or how do I make sense of that? How do I make sense of the Genesis where it says, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness"? You got to understand. You got to look at that and go, "Wait, I thought there was one God."
Yeah.
How do I reconcile that? Well, if Jesus says, "I am God, I and the Father am one," right? How do you reconcile that, right? Yeah. Now he says, I think he says they're separate persons. Is that what he said?
Yeah, he's saying they are separate beings.
So they're separate persons, but they're not separate beings, and that's where we have to be careful, right?
That's really interesting. Yeah.
So they're unique in and of themselves, but they always work in conjunction with each other, and they always are in unison. Period.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I had asked. I had kind of brought up something to Callahan, this idea that I'd heard a few times about them being the three that can actually interact this world, but there's a Godhead that they are. Have you ever heard that idea? I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying. I'm just bringing up a strange idea that I've heard before, or something where they're saying so basically the Godhead can't interact with anything because he is the totality of everything, right? He's outside of time, he's outside of space. So in order to interact with time and space, he has to create three individual unities of himself that can actually interact with space itself.
Well, there's probably, I mean, there's different ways that people have tried to explain the Trinity. Some of them help us in our human understanding, but most of them kind of fall flat when it comes to really analyzing them.
Absolutely.
The best one I've seen is really that is probably the one you're mentioning, I think, where it's a triangle, right?
Yeah.
And it says, Jesus is not the Father. It says Jesus is not the Father is not the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is not Jesus. But then basically there's kind of a intersection where it says, but all in the center, all are God, right?
Yes.
That's the way we need to think about it. You know what I mean? But also, and I don't know if this person actually meant what he said when they're separate.
Well, he
persons,
he responds. So I guess we should get on to the next part.
Oh, the other thing. I'm sorry. The other thing I was saying is there's also a danger called modalism. Modalism was actually very early on considered heresy as well, right?
Okay.
Modalism. So one thing that says they're separate beings, beings, I think is what you said. You can actually, if we break it down and say, okay, are they what he actually verbalizes? Then you have to ask the question: wait, are you talking separate gods or one God? Right? There's the other thing that's modalism, where it says Jesus and the Father and the Holy Spirit are the same being, right? Where they're the same being, where basically God sometimes, the Father will act as the Son, and the Son sometimes will act as the Holy Spirit. So they're the same being, and they just act. They just behave. He, not they. It's not even a they. It's he behaves in different ways depending on the circumstances, right?
Okay, yeah.
So that is a heresy in and of itself as well.
Oh yeah. Okay, I think I get what you're saying. Yeah, that would seem like heresy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, interesting ideas, huh? Okay, so somebody responded to him. This is Oliver Verman 8120. God humbled himself when he became flesh Otherwise, he would not have been truly man. The concept is called kenosis. Have you heard of kenosis?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, and what do you think of that one? That response?
That's fine. I mean, that works. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he humbled himself. I mean, it talks about that in Philippians chapter 2.
Uh-huh.
He humbled himself. You know, he thought equality with God was nothing to be grasped. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In other words, it was nothing that he needed to attain to because he was already God, right? You look at some of the things in the Old Testament, especially in Genesis, when it comes to God coming down and talking to Abraham, talking to Isaac, talking to Jacob, and you look at that, and some people think that most, if not all of those are, what do they call them? Can't even think of the word, but basically it's Jesus actually coming down and revealing himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've heard that theory. Yes, I've heard. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
They call it something, but in this, he humbled himself. It says that in Philippians, he thought that was nothing to be grasped, but instead he made himself. He humbled himself, and basically just goes through and it says he humbled himself to become obedient, even death upon a cross. Therefore God the Father is talking about, exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow and tongue confess that Jesus is Lord, to the glory of the God the Father, right? So that whole thing has to do with his humility, in his humanity.
Okay. So then the Western Apache replies back to Oliver. Oops, sorry. He replies back and he says, kenosis is not biblical. God the Father sent his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, to earth to teach the gospel and atone for mankind's sin. God, being perfect, had no need to humble himself. God had no need to become man. Jesus clearly refers to his Father as a separate being from himself throughout the Bible.
Amy, he definitely prayed to the Father. Absolutely. You know what I mean? But not a separate being, a separate person,
Separate person,
yeah. So he absolutely did, and the Bible, when you look at the Bible in its totality, you have to take things in context, and or else you're gonna fall prey to maybe just a couple verses that seem that basically, that they're separate beings.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also then you have to ask yourself, when it comes to sacrifice, what is the sacrifice and what did it do, right? And then who only can offer the sacrifice? It's only God that can offer the sacrifice. You could go into days long studies to really show how only God could actually produce a sacrifice, right?
Yeah,
he had to be born of a virgin.
It's kind of the it's the story of Abraham and Isaac, right? Where Abraham takes Isaac up to sacrifice him, right? And then God provides the lamb, and that's just a whole piece of the whole puzzle, right? So when they went up there and Isaac actually asked his father, he said, where's the sacrifice? Like he said, you got all this stuff, right? Where are we going? We're going up to Mount Moriah, right? If you look at where Mount Moriah is, it is either there or very close to Golgotha, where Christ was crucified. And so, anyway, so Isaac asked the question, well, where, you brought this and you brought this. I can't remember what he said, but where's the sacrifice? And he said, God will provide, So they go up to the mountain and they find the ram when he's ready to kill Isaac, because he knew, it says in Hebrews that he knew that God could raise him from the dead. Like he was convinced of that. Like God told him to do that. This is pretty strange, but he knew, in fact, if anyone could raise anyone from the dead, that's another resurrection thing. If you think about it, you know what I mean? Yeah.
That God could, right? And so he looks over and basically the angel stops him. He looks over and sees a ram in the thicket. They sacrifice the ram and then they make their merry way down the mountain. You know what I mean? After time,
so
right?
Crazy, huh?
But before that time, before he makes his merry way down, Abraham named that mountain. I think we talked about it. But he named the mountain.
He names it God. Yeah, I mean the name of it means God will provide, right?
God will. Yeah, he named it future tense. God will provide, right?
Yeah.
Even in Genesis 3:15, where a sacrifice was made after Adam and Eve sinned, a sacrifice of an animal was made. It doesn't say what kind of animal, but a sacrifice was made, and that was made by God. Right?
Yeah.
God over and over and over and over and over in the Old Testament talks about him offering a sacrifice, him being the sacrifice even in the Old Testament. My Lord, where it actually in Hebrews, even in the first chapter, it distinguishes Jesus different than the angels, Only Jesus can be worshipped, right?
Yeah.
If we're talking about who can be worshipped, only God can be worshipped, right? It's just over and over. It's hard. It's hard to stop.
It's the totality. Yeah, it's the totality.
Yeah,
of
but
the
take a
Bible.
look at that. So I would encourage. So
anyways, so Western Apache was saying kinesis is not. Kenosis is not biblical. God didn't need to humble himself. So then Oliver responds again. He said God could have waved his hand and forgave everyone. Or he could have only forgiven Abraham, but what he did brought God more glory through the existence of both God's justice and God's grace. Jesus claimed that he was a distinct person, and God can be three persons, but that he and the Father are one. Not only do the Jews in the New Testament try to stone Jesus several times for claiming to be God, but Jesus said, "No one comes to the Father but through me," was crucified like he said he would be, came back like he said he would be. And you think the path to heaven is Muhammad? I'm guessing, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, that last one, I don't like that last one that he added anything like that, because so far, no, he hasn't, this Western Apache guy hasn't said anything to make himself be a Muslim or
I haven't seen that either, but there is a question that begs, when it comes to the sacrifice and what the reason for the sacrifice was, and then do we have to do good works, or is the sacrifice sufficient in and of itself, right? If what's his name again? Something Apache?
Yeah, Western Apache.
So if Western Apache says, well, God provided a sacrifice, but it's like maybe a different religion that says, but we do all we can do to make ourselves righteous before God too, then you're mixing two things that the Bible is very clear about, right? That he's very clear about, no, we can't do anything in and of ourselves. So it is a legitimate question. I wouldn't jump to conclusions to say that he's a Muslim. I mean, it's just, I would guess though he's confused about what grace is.
Well, it seems like it seems like Oliver believes in a Trinity clearly, and I think Western Apache just doesn't believe in a Trinity. I think that's the core separation here between the two.
It is, but when you come right down to it, I hate to say it. I mean, I'm not trying to jump to conclusions here, but when I've seen in the past, when you don't understand who God is and who Jesus is, of course, more than anything, if you don't understand who Jesus is and the reason he came to earth and the fact that he provided an all-sufficient sacrifice that we couldn't do anything ourselves, like zero, then you start then most of the time, or at least I haven't seen any time where actually if you drill down, you find out that person doesn't understand the all-sufficient sacrifice, right? They don't think it's all-sufficient, I should say. It's very anyway, that's where my mind goes based on what I've heard, what I've read, and conversations in the past. The other thing too is that, this is just another snippet, right? If you look at Jesus in Matthew 28, where he says, all authority has been given to me. It has been granted to me. And then he says, Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them and teaching them all things, right? But he says, baptizing them in the name of the Father, name, one, singular,
Yeah.
in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, right?
What did you say? Matthew what?
It's chapter 28 toward the end.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Well, the interesting thing is so somebody else jumped in. Rage43220 jumped in and replied back to a Western Apache, and he said, "Great." See, I don't like this, and this is where I'm gonna say a little bit more. He says, "Great job putting God in your own man-made box of what God can and can't, or should and shouldn't do. As a human, you are never to place yourself in a position reserved for God. Now go back and read Matthew 10:22 through 38. If Jesus wasn't clear enough for you in that passage, then you should go and pray for clarity and understanding from God so that you don't fall again by leaning on your own understanding." All right. I kind of hate this comment. Now, I'm not saying that he's necessarily wrong, but it's the wrong way to approach conversations. You don't change anybody's mind by being harsh. This is what we talked about, so many times on the podcast. You know what I mean? When I hear this, the context, the way that that Rage is saying it, he is. You're saying that you know more than Western Apache, okay? And you're saying it in a way it's just not going to help bring someone to a better understanding. Like, being harsh in that way, it just doesn't work. Like, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of debates and arguments, and I've been in hundreds of debates and arguments, and nobody wins by telling the person, "Oh, you know what I mean, you're falling by leaning on your own understanding." Like, nobody wins by saying that. You get what I'm saying? Like I said, I'm not. He's not necessarily wrong, the specifics of what he's saying, but the tone doesn't help. What do you think? Am I wrong here?
No, you're not. I mean, I've done that. I've done that in the past where I can kind of be a jerk and a knucklehead at times. You know what I mean? It's just, how do you diplomatically talk to someone, right? Is really the question. You know what I mean? And I think what you're saying too. How do you not revert to personal attack?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I can totally agree with who's the other guy? I'm sorry.
Who, Rage or Oliver?
There's
Rage, Oliver, and Western Apache.
Well, I can totally agree with any of them. It doesn't matter. So I can totally agree with any of them and take a viewpoint on that person. But if that person starts attacking the other person, then I'm like, I still agree with you, but I don't like the approach, right? And again, I've done this. I've done that numerous times, right? I would just caution. Do as I say, not as I do. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I would just caution anyone to try to be convicted of what you believe, but try not to resort to kind of personal ad hoc attacks. Just try to, try to deal with the issue at hand, I guess.
Yeah. You put it in. You're getting really good at this, by the way. You're starting to get your the way that you speak and the way that you form words on this podcast really good. And I feel like I'm kind of slipping a little, to tell you the truth. I don't know, maybe I've just been a little too tired lately. Anyways, the next one is back from Western Apache. Now, he was actually responding back to Oliver. Basically, neither of them address Rage, really. But he says, Jesus and the Father are one, just like Jesus commanded his disciples and us to be one with him. It's called unity, not the same persons. Any thoughts on that one?
I mean, it's different. I mean, the disciples wouldn't say, "I and the Father are one," as Jesus actually said that. It's different to say, it's different when you're talking about John in, I think he's talking about John 15, 16, and 17, where he's in the upper room and talking to his disciples the day before he's going to be crucified or given up and to be crucified, right? And he's talking about, he's talking about love. He's talking about, that I think that's where where Jesus actually mentions that. So point being is that, yes, Jesus may have said that, you know what I mean? Jesus may have, I'm sorry, what did he say to his disciples?
Jesus
Be
commanded
one.
his disciples and us to be one with him. It's called unity, is what
He may have, commanded us to be in unison. I don't disagree with that, but they're not in, but that's not in opposition to say that Jesus never claimed to be God. He absolutely claimed to be God.
Yeah.
Yet there's one God. Again, it's back to how do we reconcile those? You know what I mean? So they're not in opposition. They're not in conflict. It's just to say and again, back to my point, the disciples wouldn't say, I and the Father are one. No, they wouldn't say that. They would say, we have a mediator between us and God the Father. That's the man Christ Jesus. As it says in the Bible, there's only one mediator between the two. That's how we get to the Father. Jesus had direct line to the Father because he was the sinless Son of God. In other words, he was God in the flesh, is the way that the Jews, even at that time, understood him to be and to say and to claim.
Yeah. Now, to finish up, last one, Oliver responded one last time. He says, one God, three persons, not exactly like the disciples. Jesus said he does everything in the same way the Father does it, and tells us to honor him the same way we honor the Father. But he's unified in mission with God and the disciples.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, yeah.
Anyways, yeah, those were them. Not too bad. Interesting, huh? I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, it's interesting. Like, I like discussion. I want discussion, and I want to see, multiple different viewpoints. And I don't know. I don't like it when we just dismiss a viewpoint just immediately for no reason, you know what I mean, without at least listening to it or figuring it out or figuring out, okay, well, where did you get that from, or why, like, and then explaining, like, either why it's wrong or why it's right or something like that. I mean, like, I don't know. I'm at this point now in my life where I have my ideas, and they're the strongest ideas that I've come across, and the strongest ideas that I hold. But I still feel like I'm not all the way there, so I want to listen to more ideas to see if somebody else has a better idea. You know what I mean? Because clearly my ideas are not perfect, or else I would be perfect, or at least damn near close to it, right? So I'm missing something, obviously, right? And hopefully someone else out there might have that little clue or something that'll give me more knowledge and more power than I already have. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's, the Bible even talks about humility. It talks about pride comes before the fall. It even talks about in Proverbs over and over again about discipline, and that's trust me, I'm kind of intersecting this thought here too, because even discipline, those who despise discipline versus those who can actually learn to take that pain, and it is painful. Discipline is not good and not fun. And we're talking about, we can talk about adult discipline, and we're not talking about, discipline on the job, God disciplining, his children. It even talks about that. If God didn't discipline you, then you might not be a child, is kind of how it puts it, but it's painful, you know what I mean? But if we can learn to use that as something positive, or basically understand that it's there for a reason, or use it to it's meant to humble us, right? And if we can use it to humble us, then I think we're better off. If we look at our work, and let's just say it's never happened to me. No, it's good. Let's just say, a supervisor talks to you about something, right? And they need to talk to you about something, and basically it may seem little, or it may be bigger than just little, right? Where it could be performance, or it could be you're in a work environment where you got a bunch of other a bunch of other associates, or you can be, I've been in this place too, where you're a customer service environment where basically you didn't handle the customer the way that they expected you to handle, and you didn't even see it as such. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yet that supervisor comes to you and they discipline, they talk to you about it, right? And I'm not talking about something that results in a write-up or can result in a write-up or whatever the case may be. I'm just using this human example to say, how do we deal with those humiliating, those things that are humiliating? Do we continue to blame something else, or do we look, and this is the hardest thing, do we look back at ourselves and say, man, I could have actually, as much as I hate to admit it, maybe I need to look at the way I behave, I acted in this way. And then once you come to that conclusion of how you could have done a better job, then, that right there is kind of it's a horrible way of humility, but humility
it's really
is
interesting. So, I totally get what you're saying. And then but my mind goes to the point, okay, and this is kind of what happened to me, and this is kind of like what led to like where I'm at now, is I would constantly be criticizing myself, or something would happen, and then I would reanalyze, and I'd constantly be criticizing myself. Like you were saying, you look at the situation, you're like, oh, well, I hate to admit it, but then maybe there was something I could have done. You know what I mean? But you do that so many times, it starts becoming a detriment to you. And there are times where you're sitting there, you're blaming yourself, and it's not really your fault. Maybe the customer is a dick. Maybe, sorry, not to, maybe the customer is being, purposely confrontational. Maybe they just don't like your face, and so they're purposely going to complain about you and make up some sort of story about you, and then, like I'm not using a specific example, but I'm just saying I know that stuff does happen as well.
Yeah.
So
I'm not discounting that at all.
Yeah,
I think you understand the context. What the
spirit
of what I'm trying to say.
I understand the context. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of like also put it out there, because I think one of the problems that a lot of people have is they do overly criticize themselves. They do overly start beating up on themselves. You know what I mean? To the point where it becomes a detriment. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. Here's what I would say about that. So I do. I think sometimes we justify things though, where we beat up ourselves on the things that don't really matter, and then we're not introspective on the things that do matter, and we should be, right? So we sometimes get things upside down, right?
Yeah,
and so I'm not.
That's a great answer, by the way. That's a crazy good answer. Yeah. Well, then how do you determine? How do you how do you know what stuff you should be concentrating on, which stuff you shouldn't be concentrating on when it comes to criticizing your actions? Then, you know what I mean? See, that's a really hard one.
So KT, and I'm just going to use this as an example. This is probably, anyway, I'll just use it as an example. We'll just see where it lands, right? So he says, "I'm sorry," like constantly to me, and I'm like, "Why are you saying you're sorry?" I constantly tell him that, right? I am not telling him not to be sorry for the things that he ought not be sorry about. And a couple times more than a couple times I've actually explained it. Look. Like if I go, let's just say I pick him up from school, here and there, right? And I pick him up from school, and he's hungry, right? And I say, hey, and I'll ask him. I'll say, hey, did you want something to eat real quick? He'll say yes, and then we'll get something, and then he looks at how much it is, and he goes, oh, I'm sorry. Why are you sorry for that? I was the one who offered it to you. Like, don't be sorry for that. But if you, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he gets his license, but when he gets his license, and he accidentally hits someone, hopefully it's on accident. Even if it's an accident, then he should be sorry, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So be sorry about the right things. I don't know if that's a great answer, but sometimes you got to look at it and go, is it, I think some things are clear and some things maybe a little more muddy, and that's where we need to figure out the muddy pieces. Some of the clear things, just be clear in your own mind what you need to be sorry for. If it's unclear, then we need to get clarity as we walk through life.
Yeah. You know what? You kind of reminded me of. I mean, we had said it in the last couple episodes. We had talked about the freedom in Christ. You know what I mean? And maybe this is kind of tied into that too. You know what I mean? I mean, you're giving kind of grounded examples right there, right? I'm kind of thinking more existentially. Like basically which things are sins, you know what I mean, and which things are not sins, you know what I mean, or which things do I need to be careful of, and which ones do I thought I had to be careful of, and maybe I don't need to be as careful as I used to, as I thought I used to be, because I have a freedom in Christ, you know what I mean. So I don't know. That's kind of what I think of. You know what I mean? I mean, I hate to bring up like the same stuff that I brought up before, you know what I mean? But like I collect those heavy metal magazines. I absolutely think there's nothing wrong with that at all. Like I think that that's it's a collection of artwork, and I think the artwork is it's very fascinating, and it deserves to be collected and kept and kept in the world. You know what I mean? It sounds, the same thing with a lot of fantasy movies. I love a lot of fantasy movies, Conan and things like that, and I think they're amazing. I think people should collect them, and I think I think they're awesome. You know what I mean?
Do you think you should collect them, or do you think other people? Do you think I should collect them? What if I'm not interested in those?
Oh, yeah, I don't even know. I'm just saying. I'm saying there are things that should be preserved and kept in time and in human history.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Sorry. Yeah. I mean, yeah, individual collecting or whatever. Yeah. You know what I mean? Everybody has the things they like, and they don't like. Some people really like cars, collect cars and stuff like that if they have enough money to do that. And I would never do that really. If I had enough money, I wouldn't spend it collecting cars. I would spend it collecting other things. You know what I mean? So yeah. So I'm not talking like that. I'm just saying, from a humanity art perspective, we talked about art and everything like that. Like those things deserve to be kept in the time capsule until the destruction of the earth, or something like that. I don't know. I might be being a little extreme with that last comment, but I hope you get what I'm saying.
I do. I don't know if I've ever seen a heavy metal magazine, so I don't really know the context, and that's fine. I mean, I don't think I need to know it right here and now. The point is that whatever we're doing, it's back to this. Are we self-deprecating because we just feel like we need to be, and we're beating ourselves up again for the things that, just because we feel, I don't know, we need to feel, maybe it's because it's a way of us trying to feel better, that we're trying to keep ourselves in check, but we're not keeping ourselves in check on the right things. We're doing it on the wrong things. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just a messy world. It's a messy humanity. You know what I mean? So it's always just checking ourselves to make sure that we're not justifying the bad that we're doing and trying to be self-deprecating on the things that don't even matter, deprecating on the things that don't matter. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, that's a very general statement, but
yeah. Well, I mean, it goes back to a lot of what we already talked about, individual discernment and things like that. And, yeah. I mean, you've got to look at it in your own life. So another thing though, then, and this is kind of what we had mentioned we were going to talk about from the last podcast on this one, though, when we look at other people and maybe they have their things, their problems going on in their life, or maybe they have their disabilities, or maybe they don't have, they're not as capable as you or something like that. And then when we look upon them and we look at, and this goes kind of back to the way that we argue with people and everything. Are we try to have a discussion with people? It's like, even if the person has like an obvious weak point that you could attack, of saying, oh, well, this is something that you do all the time that's sinful. You know what I mean? It's like bringing it up doesn't help. That's not what's going to help. Instead, it would be better to convince them, of why they shouldn't do what they do, as opposed to, just calling them out. And you get what I'm saying?
Uh, No, so I get what you're saying, but something just kind of came across my mind where again, there's, there's so many things that that we have to understand things in context. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it is sometimes a person absolutely just needs to be called out. Period. You know what I mean? Other times it's a debate, or not a debate, where it's a discussion and we're trying to just have, we're trying to have what we call a friendly discussion, right? So what is the way to approach those different things, or what is the way, like if I had, when my kids were younger, absolutely don't, there's certain things that they're not supposed to do that are defined. Some of them are just really dangerous, and you're not going to have a discussion with them, right? And so I'm just using this as an extreme example. If you got a 3-year-old kid who's approaching the edge of a cliff, a literal cliff, let's just say, and there's not a fence or a barrier there, you're not going to try to reason with them, right? But an adult, where you're trying to talk maybe about the Trinity, it may be a little different, right? So how do you go about those things? And then there's everything in between, right? And you mesh them together. Or it could even be an adult that you've basically, I don't know, you've told over and over and over, and you're about whatever. It may be a personal friend, it may be a coworker, it may be something else, and sometimes it just needs to be said point blank, right? Where there's not a discussion to be had about it. So there's so many things in context. It's interesting because that video that we just talked about, as I'm recalling, I actually was mentioning and it was a pastor who was actually poking fun at the Malakla, I can't remember the guy's name, who was saying the rapture is going to be on this date, and then the rapture is going to be now on a different date because, end of September, early October. The calendar was wrong, but he's a prophet and he should have known better. So, but I was actually kind of applauding the pastor for saying, yeah, I'm glad he was fine for him to poke fun at this guy.
Yeah,
because
you did, yeah.
Because of and I could justify that all day long, but is my justification sound is really the question. But the reason I would say it needs to be, there's several reasons. And one of them is I'm starting to listen to this podcast in Isaiah, and it's interesting. The prophets of old, they would have names for these false prophets, names for these idols which these people propped up, which were close to what maybe they ought to be worshiping, but just a little bit of a twist on them to actually poke fun at the fact that they would cut down a tree, right? Cut down a tree, use some stuff for firewood, and then use the same piece to carve out an idol and then worship the idol. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, so again, how do you, where do you, everything is in context, and we screw up all the time on, are we gracious enough? Should we have been more harsh? You know what I mean? Where is the line drawn? And that's fine. We walk through life like that. So I would not say we should be one way or another all the time. I mean, we try to be, we talked about this on one of them where I try to be gracious, or we should try to be gracious. But I'm going to say that we should try to be gracious, but there are, again, I'm just going to fall back on it and say there are times where we need to be just straight to the point, and not worry how we come across. Right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Oh my God. You brought up some great points, and you reminded me of like some stories. There was a story that Jordan Peterson talked about where this, basically the kid was born a cripple, right? His legs didn't work. And, his father basically made him, if he wanted to go up the stairs, because they lived in a 2-story house, if he wanted to go up the stairs, he had to get up the stairs himself. And the dad would not help him. And the dad did it on purpose so that the kid would become strong enough to be able to do it by himself without having help, because one day the dad's not going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened with Asmongold. His father died recently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, he made a video and he said, the biggest thing that his dad said to him was like, I'm not your friend. I'm here to teach you how to survive, because when I'm gone, you have to keep surviving after me. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's pretty crazy deep what you're talking about. You're talking about disciplining your child and everything like that, and it's really funny. I try my best to explain everything to my kid, right? Like I try to sit him down, but there's some things I know he doesn't get. Well, first of all, as a kid, his memory's not very long. I mean, he doesn't remember things from a year or two ago. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, I can't believe you forgot that. You used to do that all the time. You know what I mean? And now he's completely forgotten it. And so yeah, it's really funny. So like I said, I try to explain to him as much as I can, but there are times where I do just tell him, just no, you know what I mean? And I just put the foot down and just be like, I'm not going to spend the time to explain it to you, because it doesn't even matter. Just don't,
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense, Actually,
It
I mean,
does,
the one with mom, we talked a little bit about that, about the discipline and with the kid, you know what I mean? And sometimes you're right. Sometimes you do have to you just have to come straight down. So I don't know.
And again, back to what I said. Sometimes it's not just the kids. Sometimes it's just sometimes it's adults where you're just like, okay,
yeah.
If you had a friend
that you cared about, you know what I mean, and their behavior was leading to bad things or something like that, yeah, you'd want to do a harsh wake up call. That's why they have interventions and things like that. Is to give that person like a harsh, wake up call. Be like, hey, look, I mean, we know that we've been telling you this thing is bad, but now it's like, okay, you gotta stop now.
What's interesting is that, just think about the conversation in the thread that on that video where we had the comments, right? I would guess, and this probably has to do with most comments out there on the internet, that if that person that you had a disagreement with was sitting across the desk from you, it would feel, and the words the words and the feel would be a lot different, right?
Yeah.
A lot different. So it's easier out there, in cyberspace, just to go, have no grace and be point blank, you know what I mean? But then maybe have more grace when you're talking to the person. So all I'm saying is this:
that is huge, and that's absolutely true. And people have been talking about it like for ages, or especially in my age group. Like the millennials have been talking about this for ages about how the internet is probably really bad for a lot of people, because it provides them an anonymous identity. You can have an account, you know what I mean? You can change your account, you can change to a different account and everything, and then you can basically go out there and say just about anything you want to say to just about anybody you want to say that's out there, you know what I mean? So it's a very strange thing, and there's no repercussions for it. There's some people that talk about, like bullies are kind of necessary. It's like growing up as a kid, you know what I mean? Or at least I'm speaking from like my age. I went to school pre-2000s, you know what I mean, when I was running in the 90s, when I was ran in my first bully or something like that. But I mean, that experience of actually running into a bully is I mean, it's kind of important, you know what I mean? It kind of teaches you how to deal with, some people out there, you get what I'm saying?
It sounds really bad, but yeah, like I do, but someone could actually take this out of context and say we like bullies. We're not. That's not the point.
Yeah. We're not saying we like bullies.
Yeah, let's be clear, because we shouldn't have to be clear here. But we're going to be clear. No.
Yeah. But it's just like and I've heard this comment too. It's like people would probably be more polite to each other if if people punched each other in the face more often. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying? They used to talk about this. It's back in old Western times. It was the Western civility that people would have because everybody has a gun on their hip, right? And the person next to you can probably draw faster than you can. You know what I mean? Even if you sit there and you practice, you're going to get beat out eventually, right?
Yeah.
And so the point is back in the Old West, there was this idea of you kind of be nice to everybody. You know what I mean? You kind of, because you just don't know. You know, and it's not worth the risk to get on somebody's bad side and have a shootout, and that's why shootouts always happened, anyways. You know what I mean?
And you wonder how much it really happened in the past. You know what I mean? Like it seems like every Western we see happened in the past. I don't know. I mean, you know, sometimes civility. You're not like that because you're supposed to be. You're like that because it's preservation. You know?
Oh, yeah. Exactly. Yes, and I think that's important. That's the way you act in nature too. When you go out into nature, you know what I mean. And this goes back to my whole, you know, how I like to talk about how I like to look at the way nature is. But that's how you go out into nature. You go out into it cautiously. You don't pick up the first mushroom you see and you eat it because it could be poisonous. But there are mushrooms you can pick up and you can eat that are good for you. You know what I mean? So if you're out in a survival wilderness situation, right, you approach it with caution. You know what I mean? And you gotta kind of like know what you're doing. You know what I mean? You don't go out there and you're not running up to the bear, you know what I mean, and trying to wrestle him. You have some respect for the bear and a distance that you keep between yourself and the bear. And if the bear comes at you, you better be ready.
That's one you know, one thing I'll be in agreement with on the tree huggers is that you have to have respect for nature. You know, no, it's you know, it is. It's everything. I mean, you know, it just reminds me of so much that we're talking about because sometimes we don't come to specifics to say, in this instance, how should we behave? Well, there's hardly ever a situation where you have enough context in when it comes to these things that aren't strictly defined, I should say, right? Should we act graciously? Yes. Should we act? Should we be pointed? Yes. Well, they're in opposition. Well, no, not really. I mean, sometimes you can do both. Maybe you can do both. Maybe one is needed over the other. You know what I mean? Where it's 85% this and then 50% this, or maybe there's a time where it's 0% this and 100% this. I don't know, you know, but sometimes you work with things that are very, very much defined, and you work within that, and then it's just either yes or no, and then you work within these other things where we say we have principles, and how do we work within these set principles, right?
All right, okay, I'm gonna take this one step deeper, and this okay. So if everything is, you know, based in context, if everything is based on individual, you know, I don't know, just the individual's perspective and place and understanding of what's actually occurring, you know, in front of them. How much do intentions matter in God's eyes? Because this is a thing. This is something that I've come to where I'm kind of like, you could be doing something wrong, but you had all the best intentions in the world. You were trying to save the world. You know what I mean? So, you know, I mean, like you bring up like basically communists or communism or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like communist leaders like Stalin and everything, right? Would it, you know, deep on the inside, do they believe that what they're doing is saving the world? And how does God look at that? You know what I mean? The Bible talks about people deceiving themselves, you know.
Talks about false prophets there, you know, where they.
But a false prophet, as soon as you mention that, I'm going to say that the false prophet knows that he's a false prophet.
Well, I was going to say
that's a defining thing of a false prophet.
No, it isn't.
Oh, it isn't.
No,
okay.
no, because I thought I mentioned it before, where it says that they are deceiving and being deceived.
You did. You did mention that. Yes.
And I think that's really, really clear.
Yes.
But here's what you said something about your first sentence when you started this whole thing, and I forgot what you said. I was going to say, I'm not sure.
How much do intentions matter?
No, it was before
even
that,
before
and I was thinking, wait a sec, I'm not sure if I agree with the premise already set forth, right?
Ooh, okay.
But I forgot what you said. But the point is that
the way
man.
I understood the previous conversation was this was basically, as we approach things in life, situations in life, it's just like everyone is based on its own context, of what is happening. You know what I mean? And your understanding of it too, right? So you were talking to, we talk about with the kid and everything like that. It's like, when do I put my foot down? When do I explain things to him? When do I have grace? You know what I mean? So everything's kind of based on your understanding of the current situation.
Oh, okay. And I would say that some things are not everything. I mean, so let me be clear. I don't think that everything is not. I don't think that everything is not cut and dry. There are certain things that are cut and dry, right? So what we're talking about here is things in the more abstract, right? And when it comes to, when it comes to, again, back to what I was trying to say is that some things it's yes or no. You just don't cross that line. Right. Whatever it may be. Then there's other things where there are things in life, not everything, right? Where we say you either, where things are more in context, right? When you're talking about, back to kids, when you're talking about kids, some things not everyone understands what they do. I'm not disagreeing with that. You know what I mean? But it is kind of like, ignorance is no excuse, right? We say we're ignorant, right? So the question that we can beat our head against the wall and say, well, I didn't know, or I was only trying to do X, right? Like, you use the extreme example of Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mao Zedong, all these, well, you didn't use that name, but all of these leaders who thought that they were doing right. Well,
yeah.
Well, that's where explicitly, where it says, where it talks about the shedding of blood, right? That's pretty explicit. Now, when it comes to, what was there any gray in what they were doing that wasn't explicit? I don't know. What I will say is that and this is, I was trying to think of this one example, I honestly, a few podcasts ago, and I can't remember, and it seemed really kind of rudimentary, but it was, Mom and I like watching, every once in a while, we like watching silly court cases on TV, right?
Yeah.
And I can't remember the details, and I need to understand remember the details better, but one parent was suing another parent over, and it had to do with the decorating, helping decorate. And it wasn't that this person, one person contracted the other, and basically there was a breach of contract. It was this person basically, this person that I asked to help basically just took over and did everything that they wanted to do. I think that was more the context, I think, is what I'm trying to get across. So this person the plaintiff was suing the defendant, and basically saying the defendant just took over this whole thing that I was trying to throw a party for the kids. I think is what it was, And within all of that, there was just a lot of hatred. Well, the defendant was saying, basically, I thought it should be done this way because I really, they thought it should be done a certain way. And I'm thinking, this person asked you to do something and you stepped in and assumed without asking the question, well, what is it you need me to do? You know what I mean? It was so simple. And yet I was thinking to myself, this is just the way, this is a really good, I need to find this one because it was months ago, but this is a really good kind of a synopsis to say, you stepped in, you thought that doing something a certain way was better, yet that's not what that person wanted. And so you're thinking you may have had a better thing to do, or a better approach, or better decorations, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But you just messed up a friendship because you because there are so many assumptions you made on this, right? You know what I mean? And it seems kind of weird. I'm talking about a court case here, but I think it was a really good synopsis
It's a good example
of the human nature to say, I thought I was doing right. Well, you weren't, because you didn't even listen to the person that asked you to help. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking to myself, I don't care what the judgment on this is. But this, to me, it was so clear that you far and above just overstretched what you were supposed to be doing in the context, right?
Yeah. Well, another. I mean, you reminded me of another Jordan Peterson story where basically just a saying of his. It's like everybody believes that if they were given the ultimate power, that they would bring forth the utopia.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? Everybody thinks it.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that, I can do it better. You know what I mean? I would do it better than everybody else.
Oh, look at, I don't even look at Facebook. That's interesting. But but Facebook owns this platform. They own Nextdoor, right? I get in Nextdoor to look for jobs and, side jobs and gigs and stuff like that. But you watch some of the threads on there, and someone will talk about a restaurant they went to that was really good, and all of a sudden you'll have 60 comments on there, and 59 of them are, I can't even believe you said that. It's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. Everybody likes to be a critic. Everybody likes to, it's so interesting. That's what I find so weird about it, so fascinating. You know what I mean? That's why I kind of keep my mind open is everybody has a different idea. It seems like nobody in the world has the exact same idea. You know what I mean? Like they're all, you have some that are close, and that's why we group ourselves into things and call ourselves Christians and everything like that. You know what I mean? But then within side of Christianity, and we've already talked about all this. You know what I mean? I'm just breaking it down real quick though. But you have different denominations. Inside of different denominations, you have different people, and everybody inside of that, that specific church has different ideas too. And it's like it's crazy, and that's why me myself, I don't know. I'm trying really hard always to just say like maybe I don't have a clue. Maybe I don't have a clue. You know what I mean?
I don't think we have I think you may be correct. No. I mean, when I think we think of ourselves more highly than we ought to. The Bible actually says that specifically, but I think it's we do, and that's not to go back to what I said we ought not do, is be self-deprecating and beat ourselves and whip ourselves, and it's just to say that we need to.
Well, maybe that's
we
also
need to
part
look,
of it.
What does it say? I think the Bible talks about it. It says we need to have sober judgment. We need to have sober judgment about others, about ourselves, about the situation, right? And it's an art and a science all in one. Right?
Jesus criminy.
Is it? I mean, I'm wrong.
Yeah,
it is.
It's crazy. Well, that's why I like that's why I like these conversations. That's why I wanted to have these conversations. That's why I want to start the podcast. That's why I wanted to start doing this. I wanted to start talking more. You know what I mean? And I've gone out and I've gotten more friends, so I can talk to them more, so I can figure out how to put some of my dang ideas out there and see how they hold up against anything else. You know what I mean? It's it's not easy.
I think easy. One thing that we both, you mentioned actually really well, is that Jordan Peterson saying that basically people that think that they can run the world better or be I think it's when we're talking about people in power and I can do a much better job than they, all of us have that, but I would dare say I don't ever want to try it. You know what I mean? I don't want it when it comes down to it. Now I may like being a sounding board from 1,000 miles away and saying I can't believe they did this thing, but I mean, it's just it's so easy. I mean, sometimes those are just time wasters in our time in our life is to actually be out there poking fun at other people from a distance, when in fact we're not going to sway. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe we step back and we say, I don't know. I mean, say in all situations, we're not going to sway. We're not going to go out there on someone that gets 100,000 views on a video and have a comment out there and act like we're gonna change the trajectory of the world, and even remotely with that comment that we feel like we have to have said.
Yeah, you had made a more existential comment like a while back, like way early on in the podcast, but you had made a comment, and I said, well, that's not a good comment because it's a comment that doesn't have any skin in the game, right? So if you don't have any skin in the game yourself, how are you allowed, how could you make a such a, I mean, it wasn't specifically your comment, but I'm saying if you don't have any skin in the game, how would you be able to make a damning comment against somebody else? You know what I mean? It's like, you
yeah,
like it's kind of hard to criticize some world leaders when you yourself wouldn't be willing to try to take their place or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's weird. I'm not saying that. I mean, obviously I criticize our current leaders, and obviously I'm going to continue to criticize, and I think criticism is good in general and everything like that. But you get what I'm saying? There's a question there about, you know what I mean? How, if you don't know all the goings on of what's actually going on, like how much criticism can you give it?
Well, you did mention intent, right? So like if our intent was good, right? Like what, we don't even have a good definition of what good is when it comes to a human perspective sometimes. So
yeah.
So for me, I can sometimes just say, well, I don't know if I want to go there on that, but I will say that when it comes, but on the other hand, it's like when we're looking at world leaders, sometimes we are looking at intent, right? We're looking at, I am, as much as I want to say I want to be gracious a lot, I'm not very gracious at times, and I absolutely am very cynical, at times.
Oh yeah,
and yeah, exactly.
But both of us are sarcastic and cynical.
Yeah, and so, but when it comes to, and this is not, this is not meant to be a political commentary at all. But it is to say those leaders out there that do things, and we look at what they do, and sometimes I'll look at it honestly, and I'll say it's not really. Well, it isn't. It is intent, because if you try to follow the money, right, and you say, can I follow the money as to the decision they made, and can I follow the money to say, are they padding their pocketbook? Or that decision, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Or the decisions in totality that they did, and then we look at we know this. We look at politicians and we say, well, why in the world are politicians in general? Why are they so much richer after they get out of office and before they went in, when in fact their salary isn't such that they should have made that much money, right? Well, it may be legal to take kickbacks. It may be legal. That's why lobbyists. That's why lobbyists exist in DC. That's why lobbyists. That's why DC is the most expensive place to live in the U.S. Is the money that flows into the government, right? But it's not the whole reason, but a good portion of it is because lobbyists exist there for a purpose. They want their bidding done by the government, and therefore capitalism is kind of made a moot point, and it's really crony capitalism that starts existing when you have that. I'm bringing this up not to say I'm talking about politics, but it's to say that these leaders, when they walk out of office and they say, and they might say that, or they might actually infer that they actually hope they made a difference. Well, you hope you made a difference, but you padded your pocketbook. So most of what you did there, because of the decision that you made, was driven by money. Whether you could have made a good decision or a bad decision, but you weren't making a sane decision, because everything, the decisions you were making were based on what you were going to make in your bank account rather than am I making the right or wrong decisions for my constituents? And it's like, you may have made a good decision, but that good decision wasn't driven by your constituents, and the bad decision wasn't driven by your constituents. It was driven by the fact that you're padding your pocketbook.
So you made a really interesting point. Is you basically made the opposite statement, and you proved the opposite statement that intent. If your intent is bad, it absolutely matters regardless of the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I wonder how we could take that, though, and apply it back to the opposite, though. If your intent was good, but the outcome was bad. So if your intent...
Well, that was like the court case.
Yeah.
So if you ask me, but, you know,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
I thought I was helping the mother out, but I don't know. Like, well, you didn't. Like, everything that I saw in the court case, you did everything that she didn't want you to do, and you just thought it was better, and you basically just bulldoze your way through it. You know what I mean? Because she asked you to help, you know?
I wonder if there's I wonder if there's something deeper than intent. I wonder if intent is no longer the right word. You know what I mean?
I think
if you're doing the absolute best you can with the knowledge given to you
mm-hmm.
in front of you, but you still make mistakes. You get what I'm saying? Like,
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So let me back up a little bit, because I don't think at times we are doing the best we can with the decisions in front of us. Maybe that's where it starts. And sometimes we jump to doing something rather than going, I don't know. And maybe we have to figure out what is the question we're trying to solve for. Maybe the question is, I don't know. I mean, sometimes we're looking at the goal rather than, you know, the people we're affecting along the way. I don't know, or whether or not that goal is even the right goal to begin with. We think that that's the goal, but really, why? Like, does everyone else think that's the goal? And then when you're going to you know, strive for that thing out there, that goal out there, you know, maybe you're ruining lives along the way, and you're not thinking about that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying.
It's more of a question, I guess.
No. But they're great questions. But I'm trying to boil those things away that you're talking about. I'm trying to say, I mean, we got to imagine. Let's imagine this perfect scenario where it's like let's just get rid of other humans altogether,
mm-hmm.
right? So it's just you in a wilderness by yourself, right? And you have the utmost best intentions of doing whatever you're going to, maybe chopping down a tree, right? To
mm-hmm.
burn it for wood, right? Or, you know, so you can stay warm for the night or anything like that. But however, that tree was a very important tree that had maybe it was the tree of life or something. Maybe it had a fruit on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that fruit is what you needed to survive 5 days later, you know what I mean? And you accidentally chopped it down ahead
mm-hmm.
of time, you know what I mean? How much did intentions matter in the eyes of God, you know what I mean? When it came to you performed an action that you were doing the best of that you could with your knowledge, but really you should have done something else, right? God knows you should have done something else, but you don't know that you should have done something else. You get what I'm saying? Like, try to boil away everything else. Like, don't even think about like other people or how it affects other people or anything like that. Or maybe if it did affect other people, it's like you had already taken that into consideration. You have done the absolute best you could, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know it seems like a hard stretch, you know, scenario to try to pull off, right? But if you can boil it down that far, what does God care about your intentions or not? You know what I mean?
I don't know how much God cares about it. Well, okay, so let me try to boil it down scripturally, if you don't mind. So we're talking a lot of, you know, a lot of hypotheticals and a lot of other things. So if we're talking scripturally, the boiling it down says, again, back to we're born in sin. And basically, there's nothing that we can conceive of on our own that's really good, right? Think of God destroying everyone with a flood. It said the man's thoughts continually are evil, like it was just a pattern of the way they thought, right? So trust me here. I'm trying to get to the place, but so I don't. So God is saying they're evil. They're born in sin, and they can't solve for themselves. They can't, right? Now, maybe they can kind of, solve for themselves in the short term or in the temporal place here on earth, right? And maybe that's what you're kind of talking about. I guess I'm talking about eternally they can't, and God had to come in and solve. Now, within that, he said, I am all sufficient. You're not sufficient at all. You can't do anything by yourselves. Only what I give you. I give you the air to breathe. I give you the water. And sometimes, and this is kind of this theological debate, but God gives you the faith to believe in him, which is crazy because when we're talking about either Calvinism or predestination and all that stuff, but the Bible,
God's sovereignty.
But the Bible is clear on the fact that we're, while we were yet sinners going the other way, Christ died for us. Christ died for the ungodly to reconcile us to himself, right? Even Jesus said, you haven't called me, but I have called you, And so you start looking at those things and you're like, okay, so it's back to how much are we, how much sufficiency do we think we have in and of ourselves versus do we have sufficiency in God? And I'm not only talking about, the sacrificial death and resurrection and all that stuff that actually we can't do anything in and of ourselves, but it's the whole totality of what God has for us. And the more we start understanding our depraved nature and understanding his sufficiency for us in all things, then only I think our minds and hearts start turning toward doing the right thing and either understanding context better, or maybe sometimes we don't have full context and we do the right thing because we have that mindset and heart set. Does it make sense?
Faith. Well, right there. That's faith. Sometimes we do things not knowing what could possibly be the outcome. God has given you the drive to do something, and you're going to do it because you feel it that you need to do it, right? And then you have faith that the outcome is Noah building the ark. Right? He doesn't really know it's going to be raining for 40 days and 40 nights, but he has faith that it's going to, and he has faith that God, and the same thing with Abraham bringing Isaac up to sacrifice him. Yeah, he has faith that somehow this is going to work out.
Now, somehow, and it's interesting because even back then, did Abraham didn't know the name of Jesus. He didn't, he didn't have any understanding, because I think revelation started coming through the Old Testament, in drips and drabbles, right?
Yeah.
Where only in the Psalms did we finally start to kind of see, the way that Christ was going to be killed, right? Well, they didn't even have crucifixion at the time that David wrote a psalm, I think it was Psalm 22, I think is what it was. But we didn't have that. And so back to Abraham, though, bringing Isaac up there, well, God will provide. That may be all he knew. He knew that God, he trusted God, he believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, right? And then from there, he still did some stupid things, right? He slept with Hagar, and then he had another son, and then basically the wife and the maidservant fought, and then basically his firstborn son, he had never seen him for the rest of his life after Hagar split with him. You know what I mean? And God even took care of Hagar and said, comforted her, right, during that time, because she was kicked out, right? And so, anyway, that's kind of a side note. But it's a beautiful story in the midst of a mess, right? And that if we understand God in the midst of the mess that we have here, in the midst of the mess that we've created for ourselves, God is still faithful. So back to Abraham, bringing Isaac up there and just saying, well, God will provide. Like he's probably, he's saying it in faith because he knows God will provide, but he doesn't know to the full extent by any stretch of the imagination what that looks like or what that is, right? So he only understands it when it comes up. Oh, you're going to stop me from killing my son because my thought at the time is that you would just bring him back to life instantly, or bring him back to life when you're telling me to do this crazy thing because I know that you require sacrifice. Now you're telling me to sacrifice my son. Maybe that's the ultimate sacrifice because that's all I'm seeing at the time. Angel stops me from doing it because he's just trying to show the drastic nature of it. And then he provides the ram in the thicket, which he didn't know that was going to be the sacrifice when they went to the mountain. And then again, he didn't know that Christ was going to be crucified in that same area. What, I don't know,
a couple thousand years later.
Yeah, like 1,600 years later, or 2,000 years later, or whatever it was. You know what I mean? So all of this stuff. So I talked about it last time, where we try to get as much context as we can. We don't try to kill ourselves with context all the time. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying sometimes we have time to get context, and sometimes we don't. But sometimes we have to act and do things in faith, and sometimes we do come across, back to how we behave with others. Sometimes we do come across as a jerk, and I'm including myself in that. For sure. Where sometimes sometimes I know what to say and I say it wrong. Sometimes I know what to say and I don't say it. Sometimes I may be too nice. Sometimes I may be too mean, all these other things that go along with it. You know what I mean? So we deal with what we just know at the time when we're dealing with it. And hopefully we're so, I'm not saying in lockstep with God per se, but we understand our deprived nature versus God's ultimate
it's really strange.
Knowledge of everything, and then how do we just rely on him as we're just walking through and stepping through life.
It's really interesting. I mean, because a lot of that is a really good argument for that, God's sovereignty. I think we should probably leave it off here. That's a good closing spot. Are you good with that?
Sure. How long have we been?
We've been going an hour and 20.
Oh gosh, yeah, we're done. Yeah. I'm spent.
One thing we kind of skipped over though is the ignorance. You said ignorance is no
excuse.
I've heard it said before. Ignorance is not a good excuse. I've heard that from other people too. So
that's the way it's put forth in business law. You know that?
Yeah, absolutely. I do get that one as well. And so I think we sidestepped that because I think the intention thing was different than the ignorance, because the intention, I think next time we need to, I think that's probably where our jumping off part is, as long as we don't have a million.
I wonder how much
comments.
they're actually truly more intertwined than we think.
It may be, but I guess that's the comment that. But I'd like to go down that path and try to see, because I think right now we went down as far as we could try to find intention. And I think I want to try to go as far as I can to find ignorance.
Ignorance, like how ignorant really are we? And is that an excuse or what?
Oh man, yeah. See, it could be a huge one. We could be ultimate. Never mind. I don't want to get into it right now. We could be ultimate.
Don't give it away.
Ignorant. No. Anyways,
we are pretty stupid, and I'll give him that.
All right, thanks guys, everybody. If you're still stuck around here, give us some comments if you guys would like to hear it. You guys saw on this episode how long we spend on comments. We spend quite a while. If there's some good comments, we'll discuss them. Give us a like, subscribe. Thanks for watching. So
thank you.